Mike, we talk about the Stanley Cup playoffs. We talk about the baseball playoffs. We talk about the NBA finals. We talk about the college football playoffs. We just got done with three shows talking about how amazing the Winter Olympics are. It is the best time. It is the best postseason of all of them. March Madness is about to start. By the time this airs, we are taping this on Monday, the night before St. Patrick's Day. The first games will start. The first four will be tomorrow, two of them. The second two will be on Wednesday. The tournament officially kicks off on Thursday. We have our field of 68 sets. Um, some teams ranked a lot lower than we expected, but Michael, our four number ones are really who we thought we were, and that's in no particular order: Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida. Did the committee get these right?
Yeah, the committee got the four number ones right, and especially with Duke being the number one overall seed for the entire tournament. Um, we'll go into this in a couple of minutes. You can't. I will say this: the last few years, this committee, which does a far better job than the one that does football, um, has gotten the number one seeds right, and it's really gotten the seedings to a point right until this year. And we'll go over what we're talking about because I think you and I are on the same page about that. We did discuss it very briefly when we kind of bullet pointed the show. But looking at the overall tournament, I have no problem with the seedings. For the first time in 4 years, I have a rooting interest in the tournament, James.
We have.
So it's gonna be an interesting tournament.
Go ahead.
It's gonna be an interesting tournament. I can't wait. I can't wait till the games start.
So our top four seeds in each region, and we'll actually have we'll discuss our sheets of integrity. We'll make some of our picks here as we commiserate through the segment. In the East bracket, Duke is your number one, UConn is your two, your three is Michigan State, and your four is Kansas. In the bottom half of the left side of the bracket, the South region, defending champion Florida, who had their 17-game winning streak broken in the SEC semifinals against Vanderbilt, is your number one. Uh, National runner-up Houston is your number two, meaning if they actually get through to the Elite Eight, there will be a rematch of that championship final, only for the right to go to the Final Four this year. Number three, Illinois out of the Big Ten, and number four, Nebraska, looking for their first tournament win in school history, if you can believe that. Shifting over to the right side of the bracket, in the West region, the number one seed Arizona Wildcats, the number two seed Purdue, number three Gonzaga, number four Arkansas. Arkansas, the champions of the SEC, if you can believe it. And in the Midwest, top seeded Michigan, number two seed Iowa State, number three Virginia, and number four Alabama. That's a very loaded top 16. And I got a feeling before we go through here, unlike last year, I think we've got a better chance of all four number ones not making it to Indianapolis.
Well, as we talked about, not to bury a lead here or anything, but I don't believe you and I have any number ones making it to the final four.
I mean, we've got a
Looking at
couple in
things,
there.
um, I don't have any
Okay,
in
I've
mind.
got two.
So yeah, I don't have any in mind. Um, and no, for anybody out there who knows us, I did not play Homer. Ohio State is not going to the Final Four.
And
So
you
let me
at
just
least
throw
have
that out there
Michigan
right
getting to
now.
you at least have Michigan getting out of the first round.
I do, although LIU was a very tempting pick in that game.
And remember, depending on how the first four goes, they could end up matching up with UMBC. And we all remember the last time UMBC was in the tournament. The last time they were there, they became the first 16 seed ever to knock off a number one. Granted, Virginia was missing the best player in the country at the time.
Yeah, and you brought up the top 16. Of course, we had the development today where Alabama loses a player because of a legal issue. I don't know if you saw the other stuff. He was actually kicked off of campus today,
Yes.
so he will not be with the team. Um, it becomes how stupid are you? I mean, seriously, guys have gone from bubble players of even playing in the G League to being NBA draft picks by playing well in the tournament. So don't quite understand that. But Jim, what do you say we get into some of the picks we made going into the first round? Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's do this. Let's talk about the thing you and I disagree with. And let's talk about the fact that the only team in the entire country that made it through the regular season undefeated is in the play in. What a fucking joke. And I'm going to say this and be very plain with you. Ohio State should be in the play in. Miami should be the number 9. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because Ohio State did not have the greatest, right. Their quadrant one wins were there. They had a couple of wins in quadrant two. Their strength of schedule was up there. They were not very good against the top 25 this year. Splitting with Nebraska, splitting with Purdue, swept all three times they faced Michigan. You know, the Big Ten being as good of a conference as it is, you could have made an argument that if Duke wasn't going to get the number one overall seed, it was going to be Michigan. Um, but
Yeah.
the idea that Ohio State's on an 8 line, and we'll break down the pairings here in a couple of minutes. And Miami of Ohio, kudos to the MAC for getting two in for the first times, as we discussed on last week's show, for the first time since 1999. But it's the fact that Akron goes in as a 13 seed and Miami gets thrown in as a 12 into a play-in game where they actually where the winner I'm sorry, as an 11, where they have to win to be able to go to face Tennessee later, starting this weekend.
Yeah, it blows my mind that this team again. I understand they play in the MAC. I understand the whole quadrant win thing,
We under
but using a college football,
we understand that their strength of schedule was like 284 or something out of like
yeah, and I get all that.
360.
Yeah, no, and I understand all that, and I have no problem with those arguments. Here's where the other argument goes. 3 months ago, teams who played dog shit schedules were lauded for running through it undefeated. This team went 31-0. Think about that. 31 and a 31 game winning streak for the season. And let's be very fair, they beat themselves in the first round of the MAC tournament. Why do I feel like they still would have been a 13 if they would have run the table and won the MAC too and been 35-0 going into the
I
tournament?
don't know if they would have been a 13, but they probably would have been a little bit closer um to that 10 or 9 slot at that point, because the community would not have been able to ignore 35-0. See I think, and we might have touched on it briefly last week, is the difference between the Miami of Ohio running undefeated and somebody like Wichita State back in 2014, where they were a 1 or a 2 seed at that point, that people thought that Wichita State could have actually made a little bit of a run. Nobody thought Miami was getting any further than the Sweet 16 if they were getting out of the first 2 rounds altogether, to be able to get to that second weekend um at this point. So it's a dramatic, shift. Granted, yes, you are right. It is the conference that they play in. If Duke or anybody else, or if Arkansas runs undefeated, naturally Arkansas is sitting at a 1. If Yale runs undefeated, through everything, Yale's actually the Ivy League's a one bid conference, and Yale's in the tournament this year. They're certainly not, running undefeated. They're going to be, one of those fodders hoping for an upset. Miami's got the Miami. The difference is Miami has the possibility of upsetting a team, as that lower seed. But now that you give them that one extra game to be able to prepare, we saw it a few years ago where North Carolina was a playing team and then started to make a little bit of a deep run and eventually ran out of gas in the second weekend. You know, it can happen. Um, I'm just actually glad that they're in the field of 68. I just hate the fact that they may be one bad game away from not even getting to the first. round of the tournament because these play-in games, that's all that they are. They're play-ins. I don't call them the opening round. They're play-ins. They're qualifiers, and I think they're a joke because then you're taking, you know, two of the deserving teams from the one bid conferences, and you're basically not even letting them get to the four games in one site in one day capability. You're having 2 games in Dayton on tomorrow night and 2 games in Dayton in the same arena on Wednesday, and you don't even get to participate in the field of 64. I mean, that's gotta change here, but I'm just glad that, Auburn got shut out of this because, finally, Bruce Pearl can shut up, and I brought it up on Sunday.
Yeah, he's a piece of garbage. Um, I don't like him at all. The fact that you're on TV on Auburn's payroll and arguing in their favor is a joke. Um, I will give you don't see that much in sports. Fox, of course, now has Brady in the booth, and Brady's a part owner of the Raiders. I don't think anyone has dragged their team more than Tom Brady when he's had them on the field. So there's that.
I mean, you don't
But
see
let Jim, what do you say we get
you
it?
don't see Aikman or Romo doing it when they're calling Cowboys games.
No, you don't. You see them calling the game. Pearl is a homer, is a homer, is a homer. Is he the Hawk Harrelson of college basketball?
I think they'd be giving Hawk Harrelson too much credit with the way that he's basically whined and cajoled, about Auburn this year. Because if Auburn would have gotten in, they would have actually had the most losses for an at-large team in the history of the tournament, with and one of the worst conference records of any team in the tournament.
Jesus. Well, Jim, what do you say we start up at the top left? Um, what do you say? So we don't go crazy with breaking down every single game that we picked. Why don't we each get to our first upset on the
Okay,
brackets and just go into why we thought it was going to be an upset and go from there.
all right.
So where's your first upset in the Eastern uh, region?
I actually like South Florida over Louisville as an 11 over a 3. That's really the only major upset I've got in the first 2 rounds. I should say in the first round, um, in that one. There's just something about Louisville this year, and I think South Florida's playing pretty good basketball this time of year. There's just something about it. I don't feel like every bracket is going to go chalk like we almost had a few years ago where we only had 2 double-digit seeds get through. I think VCU was like one of them. I'd have to go back and look at my sheets here and, if we still had a halftime, I could pull that up. But there's just something about me with that South Florida game, because that's on the 19th at 1:30. So it's gonna be one of the early games, um, to be able to kinda get out of the way. I think it's got probably the closest benchmark. Some people were gonna say UCF over UCLA. I don't think so because UCLA is gonna get that star player back in time for this after he went out in the semifinal win over Michigan State. Um, on Friday night. Um, and I think UCLA's got a chance to make a deep run. If you actually wanted to go a step further, for an upset for me out of that bracket, I think UCLA upsets UConn in the second round, and I actually have UCLA advancing all the way to the Elite Eight to meet Duke in that bracket.
I also have South Florida being Louisville on the 11-6, but I'm going to go one step further. I got North Dakota State beating what I think is an underwhelming Michigan State team. Izzo is Izzo, but from what I've seen from Michigan State this year, is the lack of Izzo consistency. If you know what I'm talking about, they will have games where they win, but they don't. They win ugly, and unfortunately, this time of year, when you start winning ugly, it starts clenching and anything can happen. Again, North Dakota State is the kind of team that I think just doesn't know how. They're the ones that don't know they're not supposed to win. So I have two upsets in that side of the bracket. Um, I have UConn going to the Sweet 16, but I have UCLA getting through the first two rounds. So, it's I'm with you. I think UCLA is definitely a team that could make a lot of noise. I don't go as far as you, but I also had them beating South Florida in the Sweet 16 to get to the Elite Eight, to lose to UConn there.
I do actually, and it kind of pained me to say it. I do have Ohio State beating TCU in the opening round, although I do have them getting absolutely boat raced by Duke in the second round on Saturday.
Yeah, as do I. Have them beating TCU, and then I will use the term hood stomped by Duke in round two. But listen, I will say this as far as the Buckeyes go, and then we're going to leave them off the table from here. Bruce Thornton, who just set the all time record for scoring at Ohio State, finally gets in the tournament. He stayed through the coaching BS and the terrible seasons, and he got in. And let's see what he does. But yeah, I see them beating TCU, and the Duke's just going to beat the hell out of them.
The only thing I'll actually say about this that could work in TCU's favor is with the way that the scheduling lines up. Ohio State is the first game off the docket in that region, so they are the Thursday game at 12:15. Remember what happened the last time Ohio State was in the tournament and they were the first game of the day in that region? The COVID bubble where they got knocked off by
They
Oral
lost to
Roberts.
Dayton. Never mind Oral Roberts. The last time because I don't remember that because obviously I was dealing with my own
Mhm.
stuff that time of year. Because that was in 21. If you remember, we were T minus less than 30 days from Bobby.
Yeah.
So I was paying attention to other things. But the last time I remember him doing it, I had my own personal joygasm at work that day because I had Ohio State playing Dayton in the 8-9 game in Dayton, and Gary Cohen, the voice of the New York Mets, called the game on Westwood One. They got embarrassed by Dayton.
So we shift over
So there's
now
that.
to the South bracket, which is headlined by Florida and Houston. Um, Mike, we already buried the lead of that. I already think that that's going to be a rematch. What do you actually have? What's your upset special in this bracket?
It's not really an upset special because it's a 10-7, but I like A&M over St. Mary's. Um, Dellavedova love put aside. I just think A&M can win that game. I don't really have. I have most of that region going chalk at 8-9 is basically the same, but I have Iowa coming out of there. I just think the Big Ten is a better conference this year and was more tested than the ACC, so I like Iowa there. Um, yeah, that's really the only one.
I actually have St. Mary's winning that game because I think A&M's a little banged up from what I've been seeing. The upset that I actually have is I've got 11 VCU over North Carolina. I think North Carolina is dealing with some injuries, and I think VCU's got a chance because there's certain teams that when they get in the first round, you don't count out. You don't count out Houston. You don't count out, you know, um, you don't count out Arizona, regardless of where they are. You don't count out VCU because VCU, even going back to when Shaka Smart was there, and now even when, with him at Marquette, although they had a really bad year this year, and there's no way that Shaka Smart should ever be on a hot seat for 1 or 2 bad years. I mean, if it happens again next year, maybe you think about it. But you can never really count out VCU, and VCU, I think, matches up very well with North Carolina in this game. There's that North Carolina is only a 61.5% favorite in this game. Um, you know, Carolina, their top player Wilson leads them in points, rebounds, and assists. But North Carolina, you know, VCU outscores North Carolina 81-79 on average. They were very even in field goal percentage. North Carolina slight edge in rebounding, slight edge in assists. But VCU is a very good defensive team when you break this game down because they average one more block and two full extra steals per game. And North Carolina's had a bit of a turnover issue in the last couple of games, especially in that ADCC tournament. And this is a game I think that North Carolina could be ripe to be got.
This is why you're better at this shit than I am.
I mean, it's also my Duke homerism, and but we all remember, I used to be a Carolina fan. My grandfather passed away. I turned over to the dark side. So it's not like this is not like me rooting actively against Ohio State or rooting actively against Arizona. This is not me rooting against Carolina. I have no problem if Carolina gets through. I just actually think that you always love an upset, and VCU is they're not the kings of them, but you always have to keep them in mind. And it'd be great to actually have a team from the A10 get through like that.
Speaking of Carolina, did you see Ken Jong help host game day
I did not.
before the Duke Carolina second game? Okay. So of course he went to his undergrad at Duke and he did medical school at North Carolina. And he took a shot at UNC and they go, "Don't you have a degree from here?" He goes, "Yep, that's why I became a comedian." Oh, so let's get to the other side of the bracket, Jim, and we'll go to the West. Um, Here's my question: how much did you want to pick Arizona to lose in round one?
It's as much don't get me wrong. I'm an Islanders fan. It's great seeing Long Island University in their first time in school history, I think. Um, Even I'm not that stupid.
Yeah, but it's Arizona.
Yeah, but there's a difference. This is actually I don't have a this isn't Sean Miller or Lute Olson where I've got a problem with Arizona, and it's also the best,
True.
positioning that Arizona's been in since the collapse of the Pac-10, or the Pac-12 or whatever we wanted to call it over those years. Them actually going to the Big 12, winning that, albeit having some very, very close games, and especially that nail biter against Iowa State in the Big 12 championship. So I've got a I still don't like the school. I still don't hate them nearly as much as I do like Kentucky. Um, my least favorite program in all of college basketball, which, we'll discuss here when we get to the bottom half of that bracket. Um, but I mean, I like Arizona to put together a couple of wins. Um, but Michael, I don't have them coming out of this bracket. So go ahead with your thoughts.
I agree with you. I also, as much as I love LIU, and hey, Queens College is playing in this thing too. So I listen.
Both in the same bracket. Yeah.
There's
LIU
school around
and Queens in the same
both
bracket.
both in the same bracket, and you're talking about Long Island and Queens. That's Mets territory, and I got them both getting hood stomped in the first round. Jim, you and I have the same upset in this side of the bracket, and that is 12 High Point beating number 5 Wisconsin. My thought on it, Jim, before you give yours real quick, I think Wisconsin is a team that peaked early this season and has had to pull a few games out of their rear end in order to get to this point. So I happened, and they survived Michigan playing its worst game of the year
Yeah.
in the Big Ten tournament to lose at the last second. So I think High Point is going to come in and play like they've got nothing to lose, and that's how Wisconsin loses this game in the first round.
High Point basically is better than Wisconsin in every stat down the line, according to ESPN. They score 7 more points a game. High Point averages 90 points a game. They shoot 49% from the floor. They average 16.3 assists, which is a quarter of assists better. They out block Wisconsin. They out steal them. Wisconsin averages fewer than 6 steals a game. High Point averages just under 11 a game. High Point comes into this game 30-4, where only two teams in the Big South Conference finished above 500. Finished above 500. There were two teams that finished at 500 with Longwood and Radford. The other was Winthrop, who always loves to cause trouble in the NCAA tournament. High Point, I don't think, has ever had a win in the NCAA tournament, but they've never been in a position like this. And you always got to look, there's always one of those 12-5 matchups that looks to be really sneaky. And why do I get the feeling this is the one?
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Is why I took High Point in that game. Outside of that, I don't really have any big. any other upsets in that side of the bracket. As much as I would love to see Queens win that game, they're not getting past Purdue.
I actually
They're not getting past Purdue.
If I actually had to pick, I think this is the bracket where I actually go a little bit nutty. Um, Utah State I have over Villanova. That's a 9 versus an 8. That's not a huge thing. You could flip that either way. I have BYU losing to the Texas North Carolina State play-in winner here. There's something about Texas that has not impressed me in the last couple of weeks. I'm sorry, with BYU. I also the only bit of homerism I have in this entire tournament, and this will actually become a lot more evident as we start moving through. Between the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and the Final Four. I do have Missouri over Miami in the 10-7 game here. Um, and then, uh, I mean, realistically, getting through, I pretty much go chalk most of the rest of the way in that bracket, but I do have three tiny upsets, including three double digit seeds. Although, again, with that play in game against 6 BYU and then Missouri over Miami in a 10-7, you can't really call those massive upsets because they're still at large teams.
Yeah, I actually have three upsets in the Midwest region as well. We have a different upset each of us in there, but we have two like upsets. So let's get to those real quick. Um, number basically the number two overall seed Michigan's going to roll in the first round of the winner of the UMBC. Is it Howard game?
Yeah,
Okay. I have St. Louis beating Georgia the 9-8, which again isn't really an upset. But here's the first one: the Zips of Akron, the 12 seed, beating the number 5 Texas Tech Red Raiders in that game there. Um, Jim, the next game down is the one you have a big upset in.
I actually have Akron in that game as well. There is something about with the way that Akron's playing. I want to say Texas Tech is a little banged up as well. They haven't been as sharp, although ESPN is picking Texas Tech 82% to win that game. But there's a lot of tide swelling here. Akron winning the MAC, 17-1 in the conference, 29-5 overall. Um, and that's another game where the smaller school and the lower seed kind of actually puts up a little bit better numbers. They don't their Texas Tech averages about a half a block more, but everything else on that list, Akron outscores Texas Tech by 8 points a game. They have 3% better field goal percentage. They out rebound them. They out assist them. So that's a game where I think but then again, we've also seen things where things are this close and people pick upsets and it wouldn't surprise us in the least if Texas Tech went out and rolled Akron right off the floor um in this one. But the there's a lot of people in that 4-13 game between Alabama and Hofstra that we're starting to think Hofstra's got a shot. I think after what you said at the start of this segment, there's a lot more people leaning on that. And I'm interested to see where that line is going to shift probably in the next 48 hours.
Yeah, and if I could go back, but this is a sheet of integrity. If I could go back and change it after that, I would pick Hofstra to win that game. But I have Alabama, so I'm going to eat my L there. And it's in the next game that you and I both have an upset again, as we believe the 31-1 Miami of Ohio Redhawks will get up off the deck, win their playing game, and then beat Tennessee.
I think whoever wins that game, whether it's SMU or Miami, is going to beat Tennessee. I've seen a couple of Tennessee games this year. Tennessee is the one team going in to this that as a higher seed, you have to question whoever they would end up playing.
Yeah, no, you had said that when we discussed this last night too. And then I get to my last upset of the game of the day. In the next game down, is I have the number 14 beating the number 3, the school of former Cleveland Indian great Brian Anderson, Wright State University beating Virginia. The 14 over the 3. That's more because I just can't stand Virginia and hope they lose. Um, Wright State was the college of choice for me for some time when we were in high school. So Yeah, I kind of went little homer there, but not without merit with the way Virginia has failed to show up in some of these tournament games.
Yeah, but let's also remember every time that Virginia's kind of gone out a lot earlier than expected, they rebound their very next tournament and they stop quite a few people in their wake. So they kind of went out a little bit earlier the last time in. I could see something where Virginia could make a little bit of a run as being in Cleveland, going to Cleveland State, they had a terrible year themselves. I did watch quite a bit of the Horizon League this year. Wright State won the conference tournament. They won the regular season title by 2 games over Robert Morris, who I thought had a very good team this year. But I think Wright State comes to an end. And I think there's part of me that thinks Virginia doesn't win this game going away. I think it's something where Virginia could come out and start to hammer Wright State, and Wright State could make a little bit of a run, but it might be one of those things where they're a little too far behind when time runs out.
Yeah, and I thought the same thing too. I can't pick Virginia on the top line anymore. I every time I've picked them to go far in a tournament, I've gotten burned. So bye bye.
And then the only other game I
But
have
that's
is as a quasi upset, and you know where I'm going with this. The Masters are in 3 weeks, and it's a tradition unlike any other, and that is Kentucky's early round exit. I have them losing to Santa Clara in their opener, and I get to do cartwheels for the rest of the weekend. Kentucky is only a 72% favorite in that game. Um, and you know, there's there's just something about Kentucky. They finished middle of the road. They were 10-8 in the SEC, 21-13 overall. This game provides a big, big problem for the Wildcats.
yeah. I just think they're going to end up getting it done. Obviously, with what we're going to discuss in the next portion, I hope they get it done.
So we've moved on.
So Jim,
Go
from
ahead.
here, really, I was like, yeah. What do you say we get to? What other upsets do you have in the tournament going through the round of 32 and the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and then into the Final Four?
I really honestly don't here. I mean, going through the second round, we've already talked about, who we have at least getting to the Elite Eight. We've kind of buried the lead of some of the teams getting, to the final. We haven't talked about our Final Fours, but really outside of the first round, I don't have that miracle St. Peter's or that miracle, double digit team going all the way through like Loyola, those years ago. Um, I mean, the upsets that I have would be ones that I think would be justified. Again, I talked about UCLA as a 7 over Michigan State as a 3 in the round of 16. Uh, but I mean, I, I think the biggest upset I've got on the board going into the second weekend, I have Calipari and Arkansas beating Arizona in the round of 16.
Nice. Do we both have Miami of Ohio in the Sweet 16 in this tournament?
I have them. I do not. I only have them getting through the first round if they get out of the play-in at all. Because I have Virginia going to the Sweet 16.
Okay, because I have um, Miami of Ohio beating Wright State in round two to get to the Sweet 16, and then losing to Kentucky in the Sweet 16. Kentucky getting to the Elite Eight. Jim, so let's go here. Your Final Four, if you would, please, sir.
In the East bracket, I think that they are the best team in the country right now. They may not be the hottest, but they are playing the best. I like the Duke Blue Devils. I go to the South region. We have the matchup. I talked about it earlier, the rematch of last year's national championship game between defending champion Florida and number 2 Houston. I think Houston extracts their revenge and ends Florida's run. I have Houston coming out of the South bracket. In the West, I have Gonzaga getting through, upsetting Purdue in the round of 16. Even though it's a 2 versus 3. I talked a moment ago about Arkansas over Arizona. I like John Calipari to cut down the nets in the West region to get to the Final Four. And then I actually have no surprise here with the way that they're playing. And not out of spite to my co-host, I think the Michigan Wolverines will represent the Big Ten in the Final Four in Indianapolis. So I have Duke against Houston, Arkansas against Michigan.
So I do have a decent upset in the Elite Eight to get to the Final Four. In my East bracket, I have a big upset in. I do have a big upset in Sweet 16. Well, not big, as I have the Rick Pitino led St. John's Red Storm beating Duke to get to the Elite Eight, and then beating Bob Hurley's Yukon Huskies to get to the Final Four. Pitino's Final Four, three different teams at that point in time, if I'm not mistaken, right? First coach to do it, if he does it.
I'd have to look that up, but you may be correct.
Well, if Calipari gets in with Arkansas, it could be both of them in the same
Right.
year. In the South, no pot shots taken to my co-host here, but I think Houston gets their revenge, as does Jim. And Houston ends up in the Final Four. Would play St. John's in the national semifinal. In the West, I also have I have Gonzaga coming through. We have the same game in the Elite Eight, but I have Gonzaga winning the West region. And then in the other upset special, I have the Kentucky Wildcats beating the number one seed Michigan Wolverines to get to a Final Four and play against Gonzaga in that Final Four. So, James, we've given our Final Four. Where do you who do you like in those national semifinals?
I like Houston to get back to the national championship game, albeit at the expense of one of my favorite teams in this tournament, Duke. And I like Michigan over Arkansas to end the Calipari run. So I've got a Houston Michigan final, and I think I think Kelvin Sampson finally gets his ring. I think the Houston Cougars cut down the nets in Indianapolis. Kelvin Sampson wins his championship, rides off into the sunset. Um, he's already a Hall of Famer. He just needs that one last thing for everything that that program's been through, and as much as he's done with making Houston a national power again. He was that close. Florida went on that amazing second half run last year and denied him, especially with how that game ended. I think he takes no chances this year. I see the Houston Cougars as your 2026 national
So
champions.
I disagree with James there. I have St. John's beating Houston to get to a national final, and then I have Kentucky beating Gonzaga to get to the championship game, and it is the Rick Pitino special in the 2026 national championship game. But I have the current Pitino team winning a national title. I believe it end up being the first one for St. John's, if I'm not mistaken. As much as Louis Carnesecca was an absolute gem of a human being and coach, I don't believe Louis won one. I know he won a few Big East titles.
He
So
did not.
Rick Pitino would bring home to his hometown, being from New York City, a national championship to St. John's. I have the Red Storm winning this tournament. And I'll tell you what, it's mostly because of what they did to UConn in the Big East final in the tournament. They didn't just beat them, they dominated them after losing to them by 30 in late February. So the sheets of integrity are in. So, James, we're going to pivot away from the NCAA, where these guys are going to be hopefully NBA stars of the future. And let's talk a little bit about today's NBA and the announcement that came out the other day that they are now going to go to the Board of Governors and talk expansion. We have flirted with this for the last, what, 2, 3 years.
Yeah.
Uh, Ideally for us, we know Vegas is on the table, especially with the Raiders now there and the Athletics going there. And basketball being big in Vegas with the Aces winning multiple championships. Um, so now we got to see what the other city's going to be. I think we've both kind of fanboyed for Seattle to get a team back. Um, do we know if Seattle got the Cleveland Browns deal?
I don't know with the Sonics, but that's actually but the story that you had sent me, I believe got updated that they are targeting Las Vegas and Seattle as the next two items up for bid. If I can actually steal the line from when we talked about this last year with Willie. So you
I was
figure
waiting.
they- they've already got the T-Mobile Arena for the Vegas Golden Knights. Um, it's not like they're going to actually put him in the Thomas Mack. They'll put him in the T-Mobile because we've actually seen how successful that arena is for the All Star games. They've actually held. They hold the WNBA that stupid midseason tournament. They hold it in Vegas, don't they? The semifinals and everything.
Yes.
Um, so so we know it's an NBA ready arena. We saw how great the fans have turned out, even though the team has not been great except for the first season in Seattle in the Key Arena with the Kraken. So we know that Seattle starved to get that team back. It's the most logical choice because you've basically got a team in just about every other major market that you can think of. So Seattle would be the logical choice. Whether or not they're going to be able to revive the Sonics or if they're going to go another direction remains to be seen. It's like it's kind of the you have to wonder if it's the Cleveland Browns deal or the Winnipeg Jets type deal where they move away and they can bring the name back and then eventually kind of get the history back, or if it's going to be kind of redo the whole thing like bringing the Houston Texans back or bringing the Minnesota Wild since you can't get the North Stars. But I mean, we actually just saw with Tennessee is that they, the franchise moved from Houston, they still have some of the records and they decide they're going to bring back the old Oiler colors, even though there's a team playing in Houston. So it's going to be very interesting to see because they've actually already said that they'd be targeting the team to start in 2028 and for the 2028-29 season. And this is where it gets even more interesting because you have to figure those are the two teams that they're targeting because they don't have to build an arena. It's already there. They just need to be able to build the franchise and the marketing over the course of the next couple of years to get somebody in there. And that's actually something that when they've tried to expand, they didn't have before. They didn't have that in Memphis. They didn't have that in Minnesota. They didn't have that in Vancouver. They didn't have that in Toronto because they didn't have those arenas back then.
No, but the Air Canada Center went up pretty quick, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but that's also because of the Maple Leafs, and they didn't know how well basketball was going to be able to work up there.
That's true. I was say, yeah, when you mentioned Memphis, I was like, wait, didn't they start in Vancouver? But then, yeah,
Because
but the
remember,
Vancouver Grizzlies.
The old FedEx Forum used to be like, it was kind of like how um Kansas City's got that gorgeous arena, for pro sports, but nobody plays in it. So they did the same thing with Memphis because they've got that, and then they actually used to hold like conference tournament games for smaller conferences. The SEC used to be able to, work games out of there periodically, kind of like how the ACC does with the Greensboro Coliseum. It's not like they actually put the SEC championship tournament down there, but it's a pro style arena, but they didn't have anybody in there. Then finally you get a team and can move in there. You know, you're not going to put them in Nashville, you're not going to put a team in Kansas City, until you expand past that. But Seattle and Vegas seem like the two most logical opportunities, unless you do actually shift and put a team in Kansas City and you keep the Vegas one reserved. So this way it doesn't look like, you know, um, how you've got to basically put everything either in Los Angeles or in New York because of the markets that they're in. That'd be the only way I'd actually see Vegas doesn't get one of these two. I think Seattle's basically penciled in.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Seattle's going to get the first one. I don't think they're going to stray away from Vegas, though. I mean, I if they did, it would be Kansas City because the arena is there. Um, and then you entice some of the more popular players in the area, like a Patrick Mahomes, to come in and be a part of the brand new franchise in Kansas City. Now, the bigger thing to concern yourself with here is remember the Chiefs want out of Kansas City. They're going to leave Missouri. So, does the NBA strike while the fire's hot and turn some of those Chief fans into basketball fans. It,
The the only other thing I actually the only other detraction I see with the Gateway State, Missouri, because you've actually got St. Louis that's got the Enterprise Center, which is basically pro ready for anything. You've had basketball, preseason games there. You've hosted Missouri Valley Conference championship tournaments there. Um, you know, it's basically pro ready. Kansas City's got the same issue with that. Um, the only thing that I can actually fathom is that because now you're going to have to realign the division. So are you going to go the NFL route where you're going to have four divisions of eight, and how do you geographically align those, or do you go the NFL or do you go the NHL route and you have four divisions of eight and two conferences? So I mean, you're still getting 16 and 16, but are you doing four divisions per league or just two?
yeah, this semantics, that'll probably be a coin flip in Adam Silver's head. But if you had to put odds on it, I'd say it's 75% Seattle gets the team and 65% it's going to Vegas.
And let's discuss that because now you're going to have to take, because both of those teams being that far out west, you're going to have to take two teams and ship them over to the east. Who are you moving? And why is it as obvious as we think it is? Why is it Minnesota and Memphis?
Because they're the two closest to the east that you're going to get. If I'm not mistaken, they're both east of the Mississippi.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I think they'd have to move those two.
Or
Or they can do a crazy
you
thing
can
like
be, or
baseball had years ago when the Braves were in the NL West.
I mean, you also could make a pitch, even though they're slightly west of the Mississippi, for New Orleans because they really don't have the identity or the rivalry that some of those other ones do. Um,
Yeah,
I mean, you've got you've got a couple of options. You don't have many, but you've got a couple of options there.
yeah, but if you move New Orleans, you just make the narrative about the Eastern Conference being dog shit even worse.
I mean, at that point, you're just basically looking for bodies, to be able to, to feed to Cleveland, Boston, the Knicks, and Orlando over the next 5 years.
And if you're feeding them Zion, that's a lot to eat.
That actually would imply that he's on the court long enough to do it.
With an apple in his mouth?
Would you shut up and just push the button already?
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
It's the YZ Translator on the Wise Guys Sports Show.
I'm forever unclean.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is the YZ Translator. It is the best segment of the night because it is the last segment of the night. It is the time when James and I give each other names inside and outside of the sports world, and we give you the first thing that pops into our sleep-deprived, caffeine-addled brains. At least mine is that way. I don't know about you today, James, but I've had a lot. And Jim, you called me in between segments at one point in time at Dick because of things I said about a certain player. I stand by it, but now I'm going to be a dick too. And your first name in tonight's YZ Translator is the luckiest pitcher on the planet. It is USA baseball closer Mason Miller.
He's only lucky just because, honestly, now that March Madness is here, nobody gives a crap. Let's be honest. Outside of if we didn't have Selection Sunday and the players yesterday, does anyone actually pay attention to the way that that game ended between the United States and the Dominican Republic outside of being hardcore baseball fans? campaigning and pining for anything other than spring training right now? Michael has his hand raised.
I would be.
Because you're a degenerate.
I prefer the term baseball fan, but thanks, Dick. Why did I just hear someone say that shit is low instead of break it down at the beginning of DX's fucking theme song?
Because if you ain't down with that, I got 2 words for you.
Emotional damage.
Oh my God. Hold on. You have forced my hand, my friend. You have forced it impossibly the best way. Where the hell did my soundboard go? Oh, son of a bitch.
And if you ain't down with that, I got 3 more words for you.
Oh.
Rusty cunt bucket.
Okay, can we not do that right now?
That's more than 2 words.
I didn't say 2 words. I was just saying you forced my hand.
Michael,
What do you got for me, bud?
as we close out episode 143, look, we're going to shift back to college basketball. I'm going to hit a little close to home here. I'd like to get your opinion on somebody who we both had at one point in his career a very fond affinity for, albeit for different reasons based off of the schools they were at. He announced his retirement earlier today, and walks away with over 500 wins, 13 NCAA tournament appearances, with 3 different schools, and that would be Thad Matta.
Look, I mean, 13 different NCAA tournament appearances over those 3 schools. He's been to 2 Final Fours and 1 national championship game, and that was both at Ohio State. What a great coach. And I know I think he's retiring. There's some health issues going on still with Thad. So I hope he continues his work at Butler. I think he was there twice, right?
Correct. Yes.
I hope he continues his work at Butler. He's supposed to be a special assistant to the AD and to the president of the school. May he walk off into the sunset and hold his head high. What a phenomenal coach. You figure if you play 35 games a year in college basketball and he won 500, that's a lot of years and a lot of wins, and it kind of speaks for itself.
Career record of 502 and 223, a 692 percentage. Started his head coaching career at Butler in 2000. I actually remember because I was still at Cleveland State when he actually advanced up from assistant to head coach. I want to say that was that was in the wake of Brad Stevens taking the Celtics job, although I could be wrong about the time frame there. Moved on to Xavier from 2001 to 04. Goes to Ohio State from 2004 to 2017, and then has been back at Butler between 2022 and 2026. He was the associate athletic director at Indiana for 2021 for the 2021-22 calendar year. He's got 2 trips to the Final Four in 2007 and 2012. He was the NIT champion with with the Buckeyes in 2008. Won the MCC tournament with Xavier back in 2001. Won 2 Atlantic 10 tournament championships with Butler. 4 Big Ten regular season tournament champions. He was a A10 Coach of the Year, 3-time Big Ten Coach of the Year, and again 500 wins. I'm not 100% sold that it's Hall of Fame material. Maybe college basketball Hall of Fame. There's a lot of guys that have 500 wins. Hell, Rolly Massimino's got 500 wins in his career, and we all know my personal feelings about him from his time at Cleveland State. But very, very good coach. Again, was not a fan of his because of my hatred against Ohio State, but respected the hell out of him the couple of times I met him when he was at Butler during his first go around. Uh, Admired the hell out of him as always kind of a Xavier fan. still living in Ohio as long as we have. There's a couple of teams in Ohio we always follow depending on where you're from. You always pay attention to the Buckeyes. You always pay attention to Xavier. If you're from Northeast Ohio, you've got Cleveland State, Kent State, Akron. People pay attention to Toledo. There's a lot of good college basketball schools, and basically he hit two of the big ones in his career.
Yeah, and I remember when he was hired from Xavier, and Xavier being a really college basketball power for a lot of years for a mid-major school, fighting for fan base in Cincinnati of all places. And he was fighting for fan base in Cincinnati when Bob Huggins was the head coach in Cincinnati, and he was
Yep.
winning that battle. So you have to tip your cap to Thad Matta for a phenomenal, phenomenal career.
And I'm glad I'm
I
glad
think
you brought up
I think it
I'm
will be
glad you
college
brought up the
basketball Hall
Xavier
of Fame.
Cincinnati thing, because not only are you fighting with that, but you also have to fight against Dayton and Kentucky. So even though there's some distance between those, you've got one school trying to fight over four fan bases.
Yeah, and Dayton not so much because Dayton, I've always said this. There's three things in Dayton, Ohio. UD, or four things, I'm sorry. UD, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright State, and cows.
I just love the fact that they've got an arena called the Nutter Center.
Until you've watched a frat boy get hit with a stunner at a party, you don't know anything about Dayton.
As we are taping this on Mike, what day is it? What's today's date?
It's 3/16.
What?
I forgot about that.
What?
The video of him throwing the first pitch at a Met game and Bobby Valentine hitting him with an elbow was circulating around the internet today.
What?
I
All we
love
need
the
is broken glass to send us.
I love the
All we
fact
need
that
is
I
broken
think
glass
Chris
to this
Van
home.
Vliet interviewed him, and the interview came out today, or it might have been a rehash of one that he did previously because of the fact that it's 316 day.
Yeah, all we need is that broken glass to send us home tonight.